Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Just a minute, I will put up my presentation for today, for today's Dars al-Quran. So today I will be covering again the subject matter of the revelation in the Holy Quran about the uh, matters which pertain to the past as well as to things in the future. And I mentioned yesterday I would like to revise, just to briefly go over that and then continue on the same thing, but which was the one part, the last part of the dars was about how the verses from the Holy Quran that talk about the sun being wrapped up and the stars being obscured, that this was talking about a future time when the Muslims would go into decline. So I just want to revise that point again, and then continue what Hazur said on that, because it flows from that to the next verse about the prophecies that are to come in the future, and they are interlinked. So from the Holy Quran, Surah Takwir, verses 2 and 3, it says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Idha shamsu kuwirat, wa idha nujumun qaddarat. And when the sun is wrapped up and when the stars are obscured. Hazur said it should be borne, that is Khalifah Masih Rabi Ramallah, it should be borne in mind that the sun and the stars are, as mentioned in these verses, refer symbolically to Islam and the Muslim divines. The Quran refers to the Holy Prophet ﷺ as Sirajun Munira, which literally means the radiant sun, and the Holy Prophet ﷺ refers to the company of the pious people who borrow from his light as shining stars, who in absence of the sun still emit enough light to guide the wayward. And in the hadith, Muhammad says that my companions are like the guiding stars, whosoever you follow, you will be led to the right path. When the sun is described as having ceased to shed light, it clearly speaks of the decline of Islam, because the Holy Prophet ﷺ was its living symbol. The obscurity of stars, by the same logic, refers to an age when the Muslim divines would cease to reflect the light of Islam. This inference is fully supported by the contents of the verses which follow. They all invariably speak of an age of great scientific, political, and social advancement, which evidently is a tribute to the age. And then, so Hazur, he went on to say on how the downfall of the 500 years of the rule of Muslims in Spain came as the pinnacle, or the point in which we can say when the Muslims, the fate of Islam and the Islamic divines came about, that they would not be anymore having that spiritual luster anymore and divine light. And Hazur said that at this time, this end of this unbroken rule of Spain by the Muslims for 700 years. And he says that after the determination of the Muslim political rule in 1492, there began an organized campaign by the church to murder Islam, though the Muslim domination had come to an abrupt end. After an extended rule of more than 500 years, the influence which Islam had built over the previous 5 centuries could not have been done away with in a year or two. There was a large number of Moors who were scattered all over the southern hilly terrain of Andalusia, providing strong isolated pockets for Islam. So this was, this happened, they reigned for 500 years, but they're still kept in these areas, these hilly areas, their power for 200 years. And then it was finished. And Huzur says that there was an even larger number of Spanish converts to Islam who were no less sincere and devout in practicing Islam than their conquerors from Arabia and Africa. It was they, more than any other reminder of their faith, who proved an intolerable irritant to the Christian clergy, which had grown desperate over the years to destroy them or their religion. It was Khomeini, the loudest apostle of the church militant, who would have the souls of these infidels saved from the hell fire, whether they liked it or not. So they used force to convert these, these local Spanish Muslims back to Christianity by force. He imprinted in Isabella's holy mind the pernicious doctrine that to keep faith with infidels was breaking faith with God. He was not a man to be easily deterred from his purpose. He induced the queen to promulgate a decree by which the Moors were given their choice to baptism or exile. They were reminded that their ancestors had once been Christians or Christian, and that by descent they themselves were born in the church and must naturally profess her doctrine. Thus began the beginning of the end of the Islam in Spain, which took 200 years to run its deathly course. So this, by going through this is just giving just a brief insight into the history of that actual outcome. Of that period, of that outcome, because that was the golden period of Islam when Muslims were dominant in Spain, and they how much advancements they had in knowledge and also in faith. And one of the great mystics, Hazrat Ibn Arabi, came from that time. And then there was such, a vast amount of knowledge that was, of advancement of knowledge that came about, that when the Jews were even kicked out of Spain, they were the ones, and Huzur mentioned that in his book as well, that the Jews, they are the ones who took the knowledge which was acquired in that era, and they spread it around Europe, and that's how the when they were banished out of Spain as well, along with the Muslims, they took this knowledge and they translated that knowledge and transmitted that knowledge, and that knowledge then ushered in the era of the Renaissance. And so it's that transfer of that of the knowledge which Muslims had brought. And but so Huzur mentioned this quotation here of how the cardinal, the ruthless cardinal, was unhappy with the infidels who were threatened to beat into the gospel of peace and goodwill, and after a manner already proved by the Catholic majesties in respect of the no less miserable Jews. So they had to, kick out, get rid of the Muslims and the Jews, and they did this very brutally. And he said that no less than 3 million of Moors were banished between the fall of Granada and the first decade of the 7th century. The Arab chronicler mournfully records the coup de grace that the mighty the Almighty was not pleased to grant them victory, so they were overcome and slain on all sides. And this flight for them to leave took place finally in 1017. And this dark history, which has came on the Muslims, was also a time of freedom of religion as well. This is a period of freedom of religion, and even the Jews who were banished even about 1 or 2 years ago, Spain and I believe also Portugal had opened their borders for all of those families who had been kicked out, and if they can prove that their Jewish ancestry is traced back to Spain, that they could come back and live and resettle in Spain. So after so long, it took the Spaniards to realize and try to take some action for what they had done, although they had not did such an open heart for the Muslims. Hazur says that, let's just go ahead from that. Hazur says that the year 1492 opened 2 gates at once. One the future of the Christian domination of the world marched in with such majestic glory. Out of the other departed all the past glories of Islam with heads hung low, each aching step inflicting under unbearable agony. And then the 4th verse speaks of mountains being moved from one place to another. So next verse, this is a connection of how we can connect these verses. It says that وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ, and when the mountains will be made to move. Hazur says that in the Islamic terminology, mountains in Islamic terminology mean great worldly powers. There are many verses in the Holy Quran which mention mountains with the same connotation. So the 3rd verse, which speaks of the mountains, is in fact the verse with which we begin our study to understand what would happen in the latter days. After the initial decline of Islam, a starless night would fall to be followed by the dawn of a day which was not to be the dawn of Islam. Great material powers would not only rise, but move their influence widely from territory to territory, from continent to continent, and bring under their domination country after country. That is how mountains in their sense can move, and they did move. So all this power which transferred to the Christians after the Muslims' downfall, we can see on how the Christian nations moved around the world, and they went into other countries around the world, and they were able to dominate, which we know as when they were colonial powers. And Hazur says that while on the subject of movements, the implication of the 5th verse can be easily understood. It reads, وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ وَإِذَا الْعِشَارُ عُطِّلَتْ, when the 10-month pregnant she-camel will be abandoned. In this context, the prophecy of the she-camels being abandoned can evidently be understood to mean that better, faster, and more powerful means of transport will have been invented. The scenario of the mountains moving from place to place, great powers spreading their influence from continent to continent, is directly related to the issue of the she-camel being abandoned. It should be kept in mind that the movement of the mountains can be interpreted as transportation of immense loads, as well as the spread of influence of mighty political powers. Both of these definitely require more advanced and powerful means of transport than she-camels. Unless such new means had become available to man, it would be sheer madness on his part to abandon whatever poor means he already had available. He would certainly not abandon the she-camel and start carrying mountain-like loads on his bare back. The inevitable conclusion one is left to draw from this verse is that far more powerful and swifter mechanical means would be invented, which would render animal modes as insignificant and obsolete. The she-camel, it should be remembered, can only symbolically represent such modes of transportation as move on land surface. One wonders about boats and ships, etc., and why have they not been mentioned, and what breakthrough does the Quran predict in the area of marine transport? To this we shall return later. So this is one of the prophecies which mention about the land, the change of land transportation. And this is the time and the age, and there's no need to go into a deep explanation about this, but we all know about how much the world has transformed and has changed. And this is the prophecy that was given in the Holy Quran 1400 years ago, and has been gloriously explained. So the reason why it's important to sort of look into how these verses explain, how these verses explain the history as it unfolds. And even Huzur said that, like, if we were to look at mountains moving, we can interpret that in another sense. And there is a fascinating scientific explanation which Huzur went into, but I don't want to go into that today. But that is definitely pointing to that, the same era, the same time. But at this point, it's important to know about how the history unfolded, and how the Holy Quran, systematically explained that from one thing to the next thing, led to the next thing. First, explaining that that the Islamic powers would not remain. The light and grandeur of Islam would leave, and then there would be great powers that would pick up from that point what Islam left behind, and they would start moving that. And then how we would recognize those great powers. We would recognize them because they would have given up the old means of transportation, and that we can obviously understand that the great modes of new transportation have all been mostly all have been invented or come about via the West. And this is a great grand prophecy and sign about the latter days, and how the history would unfold bit by bit. And this is the age in which we are living in, and we are seeing with our own eyes. And when we study the Holy Quran and we learn the Holy Quran from this perspective, as the promised Messiah والسلام, has written in his book, The Philosophy of Divine Revelation of Haqiqatul Wahi, he mentioned that the only way in which a person can come to know God is if they they learn they learn from the Holy Quran the face of Allah, and they understand Allah through the Holy Quran, and by following the Holy Quran, that they can know Allah. They can begin to have an experience the truth of God and the existence of God. And so that's also one of the reasons why it's very important also to highlight these prophecies, so that we are inspired by faith, and we are able to we are able to improve upon our faith and advance in our faith. And it is through the Holy Quran in which we can get that. And I mean, let's put it another way, that all the commandments and all the teachings which we have to follow, we may be skeptical, and we may think, oh, why do we have to follow all these things and look into all these things? They're just religion, and what does it have to do with our life? But if we understand that these prophecies are particularly pertaining to our life and everything around us, then we will understand that, and we will then be shocked, and we should be, even more attentive to what is written in the Quran, because it must have come from someone who understands everything that we are living in, and understands each and every aspect of the future is unfolding as the Quran has written and predicted. So why not? We should not look at the Holy Quran and its teachings. Why not look at its commandments for man? If the prophecies are coming true, then whatever it says about for our guidance in every respect, we should look at it, because it will be for our benefit. And this is what I was explaining, is that how we were able to have a better understanding of God through following the Holy Quran. And and as we also, he said in Haqiqatul Wahi, that the only way in which the the passions and the passions of our that are overwhelming our soul can be overcome is through the light from God. If the God of light comes into our hearts, and we allow it to happen, and that can happen is if we follow the Holy Quran, and because it tells us how we can do that, so it can be possible. So these these stories in the Holy Quran should help us, inspire us to learn more about the Holy Quran. With that being said, inshallah, we'll continue next week. Jazakumullah for everyone to participating. Allah be with you. May Allah improve your knowledge, give you many reward for listening to these explanations from the Holy Quran in depth. And may you and your family continue to learn more and more, and have many blessings in the future, because you are learning the Holy Quran and trying to understand it in more depth. May Allah bless you. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.